Nathan, it is great to get to see you again. Unfortunately, we're getting together to kind of talk through a challenge that faces a lot of MSPs and their customers right now from an attack surface perspective. And if you watched my show on Beard Banter, we were going to do our best not to make this about the actual risk and do as much as possible to make this more about the solution, right? And that's why I wanted to bring you on. So, what is the challenge we're talking about here? Do you want to kind of sum it up as to what the risk is for this problem?
Yeah, I think the challenge is we as MSPs, as CSP resellers, are selling Azure to our customers, and if we don't properly secure that, we introduce a lot of risk into the supply chain. But whether it's the customer or us or even Pax8 of those Azure subscriptions, specifically in this case, Azure subscriptions being compromised by threat actors to run up insane bills that then threaten the livelihood of our customers and our own businesses because somebody's on the hook for that bill that threat actor runs up. And I believe usually they're running up those bills to just mine Bitcoin to somehow
Yeah.
monetize attacks. That's all about money, right? It always goes back to money. And in
Yeah.
this case, that seems to be the primary payoff for them. But it introduced a lot of risk to us as partners and clients.
So let's talk about what this is. So essentially, for anybody watching, what happens is if I'm a threat actor, I'm going to go to one of your customers, or maybe the Holy Grail is I get you, but it's not likely. I'm going to go to the one that doesn't have MFA, that has the ability to have an Azure subscription. So when we talk about this, we're saying Azure subscription in this case is mainly compute, right? Having access to real Azure proper to be able to spin up a subscription of resources. And what the threat actors do is they go in and now go and spin up really quickly with APIs, depending on their sophistication. Really quickly, they spin up a
Mhm.
bunch of machines, and they're very expensive machines. They're usually the N series or NV series that have the video cards for compute
Yep.
and being able to do mining. And what they do is they go in and really quickly spin up lots of resources. And there's a perfect storm here, and here's why: Azure is post paid, which
Yes.
means they get 28, 30 days, 34 days to run these machines. And unless you're watching it or have some type of alerts or BI or something that shows you this, you won't see it until you get the bill for 100,000 or a million or 20,000 or whatever it may be.
Yep.
And, Nathan, you've heard from being in the channel that there's been partners even going out of business potentially from this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Customers and partners where all of a sudden, like you said, you've run up a $500,000 bill. Can your customer afford that bill? Can you afford that bill? And in the end, we've all signed agreements that said we'll pay the bills of our customers, right? That
Yeah.
we're reselling and we get to make our percentage off it because we're vouching that the two of us are
Well,
going to pay these things.
well, let's bring it right out of Microsoft's mouth, right? This is a article dated January 12th, to put this in perspective of its nascence. And it says applies to Partner Center, Microsoft Cloud for US government. So they're also saying AUSG even, right? And it says appropriate roles: global admin, user management admin, admin agent, billing admin. We strongly recommend that you implement rigorous fraud prevention and detection risk mitigation controls. You are financially responsible for fraudulent purchases by your customers and customers' non-payment of purchase services. And if you think about that, Microsoft has said in no uncertain and unequivocal terms, if you have a customer that gets compromised and they have one of these $100,000 bills, you will be paying it. Period. And you get into this world where what do you do to defend yourself from that, right? How should, and this is the tackling of this 2/3 into the how shoulds, right? We've
Right.
spent 4 minutes talking about the problem: people getting in, adding massive compute resource cost, and then an MSP being forced to pay it. Microsoft's out in their own words. What's the solution, Nathan? How do you approach this if you were an MSP?
Yeah, it's a big challenge because, like you said, if I throw an extra 500 Microsoft 365 E5s on a client site, I get an email from Pax8 saying, "Hey, thanks for your order." Like I get these,
Yeah.
there's these flows
Stop
that
points, the oh no moments, right? Yeah,
who did
exactly.
that and why, right? With Azure, like you said, there's not the same built-in kind of alerting. You're not buying a product. It's just you've agreed to you've given your 16-year-old a limitless credit card, and you're hoping
Yep.
they're responsible with it, and then they
Yeah.
leave it somewhere and somebody else picks it up. That's what's happening here, right? So, I mean, I think this comes back to the same thing we've been preaching for a long time. It's IT security is always about the basics,
It
and
is, isn't it?
so enforcing MFA on critical accounts it's criminal if you're not, honestly,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the world we live in where
I like the
you got
staunchness of criminal, but I would say today it's criminal in that editorial sense, not in
yes,
the handcuff sense, but it's getting
that's
that
fair.
way and it's heading
It's
that way
negligence for
potentially.
sure.
Yeah. It's definitely negligence. Yeah.
And I mean, that's where we settled on a couple years ago. We just aren't going to run, not even admin accounts. We don't allow people to run 365 accounts without MFA
Yeah.
and be a client of ours because I got tired of doing post-incident reviews and seeing somebody lose their password and they log in and there's no prompt. And I said, I just don't want to investigate one of these ever again.
Yeah.
They're gonna at least have to get through MFA. It's that simple. But those policies, the way an Azure subscription has worked is it's tied to a directory. And so if it's tied to your customer's Active Directory and you have decent conditional access policies in there that cover guest users and admin accounts.
Yep. And specifically, you mean Azure Active Directory, right? In this instance with
Correct.
CA. Yeah. Yep.
Azure Active Directory and conditional access policies. And it's easy to build it out even for a few accounts. You don't have to have, conditional access requires Azure AD Premium, which is not included in every Microsoft plan.
But it is in Business Premium, which is pretty much across the board for that aspect.
It is in Business Premium, which is one of the reasons we've standardized on that. But you can buy those premium licenses for the 5 admins you have. I've got 5 admins.
The P2 license that you need or P1 license that you need, whatever it may be. Yeah.
Throw it on there, build a conditional access. And Azure actually is one of the easiest things to secure in conditional access. There's a lot of Microsoft stuff that you can't get granular with conditional access. I can't go, like Partner Center, for example, I can't go lock down and say,
yeah, it's because it's an admin agents group, right? So that's why it doesn't work that way. Yeah, 100%.
Right. But I can Azure. The Azure portal is a selectable option in there. So you can go and say, I bought 5 licenses. I took my 5 admin accounts.
Yep.
And I said, for any login to the Azure portal, I'm requiring MFA at the minimum, but it's with auth strengths. You could say, I'm requiring FIDO 2.0. You either have to have Windows Hello or a YubiKey to get in here and do anything. But you automatically made that a different equation for getting in there and executing one of these attacks.
100%. Right. And let's unpack that a little bit, right? In the sense that if you look at the kill chain, I need to get access to an account, right? So I need to get in. That means probably no MFA on that account. And that account needs to have access to Azure. So the point is essentially that, or have the ability to add access to Azure, I suppose is the other challenge. That's why global admins fall under the same category. But that said, I need to have access to Azure subscription. So if I'm going to compromise Nathan's employee number 7, then that MFA would be the stop. And escalatory MFA would be very prudent, right? Meaning now it's not just a push or something I can con you out of. I need a FIDO token, to your point.
Right.
But if you can stop that kill chain anywhere along the line, meaning that I don't give anybody that has access to Azure anything without MFA, and I don't give any admins access without MFA. If you do those 2 things, that's it, and put a simple CA policy in place, you can make it to where you only have to target those individuals. So I'm not saying you shouldn't be doing MFA everywhere. You should be doing MFA.
Yes. Yeah.
But if you can't, and you're one of these MSPs that's getting destroyed for that action, if one of your customers come up and said, we need access to Azure, we're a developer, we're working on our own stuff, we want access, fine. It comes with the caveat of the only way I'm going to do this is with a FIDO token or at least an MFA policy and X, right? Like that's kind of the way you would approach this, right, Nathan?
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you get to your next step, which is, let's talk about other best practices. Maybe the admins on an Azure portal aren't daily drivers. It's convenient to have the daily driver, but if it's a second account, my guess is that you can trace most of these attacks to a phishing attack.
And there's a control that supports that, right? In the controls, it says, hey, have a separate admin account in CIS than your daily driver. And when you start thinking about Azure, if I'm working in the VMs, fine, maybe it's my daily driver. But if I'm working on the outside container host of infrastructure as a service where I have giant risk surface and anybody can create anything and I have to pay for it next month, maybe I need to treat that like admin functions in that way, right?
And I think a lot of us have gotten good about that with global admin, but Azure's just easy. I hop in and I do something. Do I have Azure in the same set of controls? Thinking about talking to here, I know I have access with my daily driver to a couple Azure subscriptions where I don't have any global admin rights anymore on my daily driver. So it's a
great call out.
It's just a chance to keep improving. As the threat landscape changes, we've got to adjust our actions there. So
and let's talk about this threat landscape, right? I think some of this is spurred by a resurgence in the profitability of coin mining with change of stake or proof of stake and other changes that have happened, that these threat actors are now moving towards these more CPU and GPU mineable coinage, if you will, right? And they're able to profit from it again. So when you think about this, everybody misses this point. Threat actors are just business people, right? Like at the end of the day, they're just like, what's the easiest path to make the money?
Right.
How can I be the
Right.
most efficient at making money? How can I grow? And this is that new way right now that's being driven.
Right. Right.
And you're unfortunately the willing or unwilling, sometimes victims of this. And, that's my call to action on this, Nathan. Great. Thank you for joining me on this, but it really is go do three things. One, review your clients that have admin access to any Azure subscription and ensure that they have MFA in place on the accounts that have access to that. Second, anyone that has an Azure subscription, period, all global admins must be under a conditional access policy with MFA, right? I think those are fair things to take and do right now. And I think that second piece is then also go into those reviews of those clients and any non-admins that have access to those Azure subs. Those are also people that should have MFA. And I would start even escalating and saying, because of the increased risk, perhaps we do use a FIDO token like this, right? We do carry around and use our FIDO tokens.
Mine in my pocket.
So
I've
got like 7 now. I got a sweet deal this year for 5 of the 5 Cs. So it's pretty awesome. But
that's awesome.
Anyways.
Well, and I think one other note to bring in there is go look at your conditional access policy. One thing that happens with Azure is I bring in a third-party consultant with their Gmail account or their Google account.
Ooh, it's the guest account challenge, isn't it?
Guest accounts. So pay attention to your details in your conditional access policy for your Azure subscription. Don't exclude guest accounts. So there's some. It's attention to detail that goes the distance in these sorts of scenarios.
Well, if you stuck around till this 11 and a half-ish moment, you actually got the Nathan Taylor special ending to this song, which is the guest accounts. Because you're right. If you bring a guest account in and give them access and they're being controlled by their tenant, the weakness will be on whatever their tenant settings are. And you have to make sure your guest account CAs are in place to actually add those extra layers to those accounts in vision of your own risk and your own data for your customer. And that's how you become a good steward of their own risk. This one really is a customer impacting where you'll either have to enforce them to pay or they'll have to enforce you and you'll have to fight it out. This is a big one. So Nathan, you're freaking awesome as usual. Thanks for being here with me. I'm glad to get this message out. MSPs, please comment below. Tell me if we've missed something. Tell me if we're off base. Tell me if Nathan's beard looks better than mine. If you do, please leave this channel and disconnect. But anyways, thanks, brother. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Matt.